Joining us live to dig a little deeper into the action taken by the president is McGeorge School of Law professor Leslie Jacobs. So Leslie, thank you so much for being here with us. What gives the president the authority to do this and go against the governor's wishes and deploy the National Guard?
Well, there is a law that says that the president can indeed nationalize the National Guard in certain circumstances, a rebellion, or when federal troops or federal authorities are unable to enforce the law. So he has invoked that. It does say that it's supposed to go through the governors of the states, and so he did not do that, although there is some limited precedent for presidents nationalizing the National Guard without the consent of a governor.
Well, and the precedent is decades ago. So let's talk about the last time we saw this happen. The last time we've seen nationalization of the National Guard. And one thing I want to emphasize here as well is that there's another law that says even if the president does nationalize the National Guard, they can only be used in a support role. They can't be used for law enforcement purposes. And so the president would have to invoke another law called the Insurrection Act in order to use the National Guard for law enforcement purposes as opposed to support purposes. And that would be an even bigger deal if he were to do that, and he hasn't. Right, and I should have specified what I was really referencing there was against the wishes of the governor. That goes back to 1965, Lyndon B. Johnson, and civil rights issues at that point. So let's talk about what actually changes having the National Guard on the ground for the protesters.
Well, it's support for the federal officials, and so as far as protesters' rights, nothing changes. They have the same rights that they had before, which is they have free speech rights to be peaceful and to be in places where they're lawfully allowed to be. They don't have the right to do things that are illegal. Damage, violence, that sort of thing.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. So we know. I know that in the state, using those Cal Guard troops and other parts of the state, we've seen them down in San Diego assisting with the efforts of Customs and Border Patrol at the southern border to stop the flow of migrants and also illegal drugs. Now we're seeing, of course, the military that we're hearing is going to be mobilized to Los Angeles. So a lot goes into this. California is now suing to block the president's order for California Guard troops. How do you think this will affect the state's chance of success here?
Well, a court's going to have to decide about that, and the claims that the state is making are, number one, the circumstances for the law that the president's invoking don't exist. It's not a rebellion, and the state can take care of this problem. He doesn't have the circumstances to do it. They're also claiming that it has to go through the governor, and he didn't do that. And so that will involve interpretation of the law. It will involve a court having to look at it, and courts will be hesitant to step in something like this because they would be acting between the president and the state. But we'll see what a court has to say.
So, Professor Jacobs, before I let you go, we have to ask about the rhetoric really ramping up with threats that the president could have Governor Newsom arrested. Just as a legal expert, what would you be looking at given any kind of scenario like that?
Well, the president can have the governor arrested if the governor does something illegal, and the president would be able to arrest someone else in those circumstances. But the president can't just arrest the governor for doing his job.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate your expertise as always.
Yeah, thank you so much.